The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered wooden station, and Eleanor Jameson clutched her worn carpet bag tighter, knowing it contained everything she owned in this world, which amounted to 2 threadbare dresses, a hairbrush missing half its bristles, and a faded photograph of her late mother. The Arizona heat hit her like a wall as she stepped down into Casa Grande, the dust swirling around her ankles and coating the hem of her already travel-stained dress. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Boston to meet a man she knew only through 6 carefully written letters. And now, standing in the blazing sun of this frontier town in the summer of 1878, she wondered if she had made the most foolish decision of her 22 years. The station master, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained whiskers, pointed toward the general store across the dusty street. The Morgan Ranch is about 5 miles north. Garrett Morgan usually comes into town on Tuesdays for supplies. That's today, so you might catch him. Eleanor nodded her thanks and walked carefully across the rutted road, her boots already gray with dust. The general store smelled of leather, coffee, and something indefinable that spoke of the frontier. A woman in a calico dress looked her up and down with undisguised curiosity, and Eleanor felt the heat rising in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. She had just settled on a bench outside when she heard the sound of hoofbeats and the creak of wagon wheels. A man swung down from a buckboard, tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that needed cutting. He moved with an easy confidence that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin. His clothes were worn but clean, his boots scuffed from honest work. When he glanced her way, his eyes were an unexpected shade of gray-green, like sage after rain. "Excuse me," Eleanor said, rising from the bench, her voice trembling slightly. "I am looking for Garrett Morgan." The man stopped, his expression unreadable. "I am Garrett Morgan." Eleanor's breath caught. She had imagined this moment 100 times during the long journey west, but now that it was here, her carefully rehearsed words fled. "I am Eleanor Jameson, from Boston. We have been corresponding." Garrett's face went through several expressions quickly: surprise, confusion, and something that might have been dismay. "Miss Jameson, I received a telegram yesterday. I thought you were not coming until next month." "The letter must have gone astray," Eleanor said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I sent word 3 weeks ago about the earlier departure." An awkward silence stretched between them. A tumbleweed rolled past, and somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Eleanor felt her heart sinking with each passing second. This was not how she had imagined their first meeting. She had pictured smiles, perhaps a tentative handshake, some sign of welcome. Instead, Garrett Morgan looked like a man who had just been handed an unexpected and not entirely welcome surprise. "I see," Garrett finally said. He removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Eleanor would come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "Well, Miss Jameson, welcome to Casa Grande. I apologize for my lack of preparation. The ranch house needs work, and I had hoped to have things more settled before your arrival." "I do not require much," Eleanor said quietly. "I had very little in Boston, and I have even less now." Something in her tone must have reached him because his expression softened. "Let me finish my business here, and then I will take you out to the ranch. Have you eaten?" "Not since yesterday morning." Garrett's eyes widened. "Yesterday? Come inside." "Martha keeps a pot of stew on the stove for travelers." He guided her into the general store with a hand that hovered near but did not quite touch her back. The proprietor's wife, Martha Henderson, bustled over immediately. She was a round woman with kind eyes and flour on her apron. "This is Miss Eleanor Jameson," Garrett said. "My intended bride. She needs a hot meal and perhaps a place to freshen up while I load the wagon." Martha's face lit up with genuine warmth. "Oh, my dear, welcome. Come with me to the back room. I will heat some water for washing, and you can have all the stew you can eat. Garrett, you take your time with those supplies." Eleanor followed Martha through a curtained doorway into a small, tidy room. The older woman chattered cheerfully as she poured water from a kettle into a basin. "Garrett Morgan is one of the finest men in this territory. Honest as the day is long and works harder than any 3 men I know. He took over his father's ranch 5 years ago when Gerald died suddenly. Heart gave out during the winter of '73. His mother had already passed some years before that. Garrett has been running that place all by himself, trying to build it into something substantial. It is about time he found himself a wife." "He seemed surprised to see me," Eleanor said carefully as she washed her face and hands. The water was blissfully cool, and she felt some of the travel grime slipping away. "Men are always surprised when life does not go exactly according to their plans," Martha said with a knowing smile. "But Garrett is adaptable. He will come around quickly enough once the shock wears off. Now, let me get you that stew." The food was simple but delicious. Beef stew thick with vegetables and served with fresh bread. Eleanor had not realized how hungry she was until the first bite touched her lips. She ate slowly, trying to maintain some semblance of ladylike behavior, but Martha kept refilling her bowl. "Tell me about Boston," Martha said, settling into a chair across from Eleanor. "I have never been east of St. Louis." "It is crowded and cold in winter," Eleanor said. "I worked as a seamstress in a factory after my mother died 2 years ago. The work was hard, the pay was poor, and my prospects were limited. When I saw Garrett's advertisement in the newspaper, it seemed like an answer to prayer." "Were you alone in Boston?" "Completely alone. My mother was all I had, and when the consumption took her, I had nothing and no one." Martha reached across and patted her hand. "Well, you are not alone anymore. This territory can be hard on women, but there is good community here. We look after our own." Garrett appeared in the doorway, his hat in his hands. "The wagon is loaded, Miss Jameson. If you are ready, we should go. The afternoon heat only gets worse." Eleanor thanked Martha profusely and followed Garrett outside. He helped her up onto the wagon seat with surprising gentleness, and she noticed his hands were calloused and strong. He climbed up beside her, released the brake, and clicked his tongue to the horses. They moved forward at a steady pace, leaving the small cluster of buildings that made up Casa Grande behind them. The landscape stretched out in all directions, vast and open in a way that made Eleanor's chest feel tight. She had never seen so much space, so much sky. In Boston, buildings pressed close on all sides. Here, the world seemed endless. The heat shimmered off the desert floor and strange plants dotted the landscape, including the enormous cacti she had only read about in books. "Those are saguaros," Garrett said, noticing her gaze. "They only grow in this part of the world. Some of them are hundreds of years old." "They are magnificent," Eleanor said honestly. "Strange but magnificent." "That describes most of Arizona," Garrett replied with the ghost of a smile. "Strange but magnificent." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon, the plodding of the horses' hooves, and the occasional call of a bird. Eleanor kept her hands folded in her lap, acutely aware of Garrett's presence beside her. He was taller than she had imagined, broader in the shoulders. His letters had been articulate and thoughtful, revealing a man who read books and thought deeply about things. She had not expected such physical presence. "I apologize again for the poor welcome," Garrett said finally. "You deserved better. You were surprised. I understand. The fault is mine for not ensuring my letter reached you." "No fault, just circumstance. I want you to know that I take my commitment seriously. I wrote to you in good faith, and I meant every word of those letters. I will do my best to be a good husband to you." Eleanor felt some of the tightness in her chest ease. "And I will do my best to be a good wife." "The ranch house is small," Garrett continued, his eyes on the trail ahead. "2 rooms, though I have been working on adding a third. There is a barn for the horses, a small chicken coop, and about 200 acres of grazing land. I run cattle, mostly. The herd is not large, but it is growing. The work is hard, and life out here can be lonely." "I am not afraid of hard work or loneliness," Eleanor said. "I have known both intimately." Garrett glanced at her, really looked at her for the first time since they had left town. Eleanor met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away. Something passed between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of mutual honesty. "I will not lie and say I fell in love with your letters," Garrett said slowly, "but I respected them. You wrote with intelligence and humor. You did not paint yourself as something you were not. That matters to me more than pretty words." "I feel the same about your letters," Eleanor replied. "You were honest about what life here would entail. You did not try to make it sound easier than it is. Then we start with honesty, at least. That is more than many marriages have." The ranch appeared as they crested a small rise. The house was indeed small, but it was well built and tidy. The wood looked weathered but solid. A covered porch ran along the front, and Eleanor could see curtains in the windows. The barn was larger than the house, painted red with white trim. A windmill turned lazily in the breeze, pulling water from the ground. It was humble, but it was clean and well kept, and Eleanor felt a surge of relief. She had feared worse. Garrett pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and jumped down, then came around to help Eleanor descend. This time, his hands gripped her waist firmly as he lifted her down, and Eleanor felt the strength in them. Her feet touched the ground, but he did not immediately release her. "Welcome home, Eleanor," he said softly. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a small shiver through her despite the heat. "Thank you, Garrett." He released her and grabbed her carpetbag from the wagon. "Let me show you inside. It is not much, but it is yours now as much as mine." The interior was dim and blessedly cool after the bright heat outside. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room combined. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and a sturdy table with 4 chairs occupied the center. Shelves lined another wall, holding dishes, food stores, and a surprising number of books. A rocking chair sat near the fireplace with a lamp beside it. "The bedroom is through there," Garrett said, pointing to a doorway covered with a canvas curtain. "I have been sleeping in the barn since I got the telegram yesterday. I figured you would want privacy and time to settle in." Eleanor turned to him quickly. "You cannot sleep in the barn. This is your home." "I will not push myself on you," Garrett said firmly. "We need time to know each other before we become truly husband and wife. I will sleep in the barn for now. There is a cot there that is comfortable enough." "That is not right. You should not be displaced from your own home." "Eleanor, please. This is how I want to do this. I want you to feel safe here, to have time to adjust. We can discuss arrangements later, but for now, this is best." The kindness in his voice, the consideration, made Eleanor's eyes sting with unexpected tears. She blinked them back quickly, not wanting to appear weak. "You are very kind." "I am practical," Garrett corrected, but his tone was gentle. "Now let me show you where everything is. The well is out back and the pump works well. The privy is behind the barn. I keep chickens, so there are fresh eggs. The root cellar stays cool even in high summer. There is flour, sugar, coffee, and other staples in the larder. I am a decent cook, but I imagine you are better." "I can cook," Eleanor confirmed. "My mother taught me, and I learned more from the other women in our boarding house." Garrett showed her through the small house, pointing out where he kept things, how the stove worked, which floorboards creaked. The bedroom was simple. A large bed with a quilt, a dresser with a mirror, hooks on the wall for clothes. One window looked out toward the distant mountains. It was Spartan but clean, and the bed looked comfortable. "I will let you rest," Garrett said. "The journey must have exhausted you. I have work to do in the barn and with the cattle. If you need anything, ring the bell on the porch and I will hear it." He left, and Eleanor sat down on the edge of the bed, her carpetbag at her feet. The enormity of what she had done washed over her. She was hundreds of miles from everything she had ever known, in a harsh land she did not understand, with a man who was essentially a stranger. The bed was soft beneath her, and the room was cool. She lay back, intending to rest for just a moment, and fell immediately into a deep, exhausted sleep. When she woke, the light slanting through the window had turned golden with approaching evening. Eleanor sat up quickly, disoriented and embarrassed. She had slept away the entire afternoon. She splashed water on her face from the basin on the dresser, smoothed her hair as best she could, and ventured into the main room. The house was empty, but she could hear sounds from outside. Eleanor went to the door and saw Garrett working near the barn, carrying buckets of water to a trough. She watched him for a moment, noting the easy way he moved, the efficiency of his actions. He had removed his shirt in the heat, and she could see the play of muscles across his back and shoulders. She looked away quickly, feeling heat rise in her face that had nothing to do with the temperature. She needed to make herself useful. Eleanor surveyed the kitchen area and found vegetables in the larder, along with a haunch of dried meat. She could make a stew. She set to work, her hands moving through familiar motions, chopping vegetables, seasoning meat, building a fire in the stove. The work was calming, giving her something to focus on besides her uncertain future. By the time Garrett came inside, wiping his face with a cloth, a pot of stew was bubbling on the stove, and Eleanor had found flour and lard to make biscuits. The small house smelled of cooking food, and Garrett stopped in the doorway, surprise clear on his face. "You did not have to do that," he said. "I told you to rest. I rested quite enough. I cannot remember the last time I slept so soundly. I wanted to be useful." Garrett pulled his shirt back on and moved to the wash basin to clean up properly. "It smells wonderful. I usually just fry some salt pork and call it supper. Well, tonight you will have something more substantial." They ate together at the table, and the silence was less awkward than before. The food was good, and Eleanor felt a small surge of satisfaction when Garrett ate 2 large helpings and 3 biscuits. "You can cook," he said appreciatively. "That stew is the best thing I have eaten in months. I am glad you enjoyed it. I will need to learn what ingredients you have available here. I am used to city markets. There is more variety than you might think. The general store gets shipments regularly, and some folks have gardens. I have been meaning to start one, but there has never been time." "I could start a garden," Eleanor offered, "if you tell me what grows well here. Tomatoes, beans, squash, peppers. They all do well if you water them properly. The heat is intense, but the growing season is long." After supper, Eleanor washed the dishes while Garrett brought in more water and checked the locks on the chicken coop. The domesticity of it felt strange and comforting at once. When darkness fell complete and heavy, full of stars like Eleanor had never seen, Garrett lit a lamp and set it on the table. "I have some paperwork to do," he said. "Cattle records, but there are books on the shelf if you want to read, or you could sit on the porch. It cools down nicely once the sun is gone. I think I will read, if you do not mind. It has been a long time since I had access to books. Take any you like. I enjoy reading, though I do not get much time for it these days. Eleanor selected a volume of poetry and settled into the rocking chair. Garrett sat at the table with his papers and a pencil, his brow furrowed in concentration. The lamplight cast warm shadows across his face, and Eleanor found herself watching him more than reading. He had a strong profile, a firm jaw, and those surprising eyes. His hands, scarred and calloused, moved across the paper with unexpected grace. "You are staring," Garrett said without looking up, but there was amusement in his voice. Eleanor felt her face flame. "I apologize, I was merely thinking." "About what?" "About how strange this all is. Yesterday morning, I was in a crowded boarding house in Boston, surrounded by noise and people. Tonight, I am in the Arizona desert with a man I met only hours ago, and it is so quiet I can hear the wind." Garrett looked up then, meeting her eyes. "Do you regret coming?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. "No, I do not think I do. I am frightened and everything is uncertain, but I do not regret it. There was nothing for me in Boston but more of the same hardship. At least here there is possibility." "I will try to make sure you never regret it," Garrett said seriously. "I know this is not the life you would have chosen under different circumstances, but I will work hard to make it a good life." "I believe you," Eleanor said, and she did. Later, when Eleanor retired to the bedroom, she found that Garrett had brought her carpetbag in and set it on a chair. The bed had been made with obvious care, the quilts smoothed and pillows fluffed. She changed into her nightdress, one of the 2 garments in her bag, and noticed it was thin and worn, with careful patches in several places. Everything she owned was shabby and mended, the possessions of someone who had struggled for a long time. She lay in the large bed, very aware that it was Garrett's bed, that it smelled faintly of him, something clean and masculine that she could not quite identify. Through the canvas curtain, she could hear him moving around the main room, the sound of boots on floorboards, the clink of the lamp being extinguished. Then the front door opened and closed, and she knew he had gone to the barn. Eleanor stared up at the ceiling, visible in the moonlight that streamed through the window. She was married in the eyes of the law, through the proxy marriage that had been arranged by mail, yet she and Garrett were strangers sleeping in separate buildings. It was an odd beginning, but it spoke to his character that he was willing to give her time and space. Many men would not have been so considerate. The next days fell into a pattern. Eleanor woke with the sun, started the fire in the stove, and made coffee and breakfast. Garrett came in from the barn, washed up, and ate quickly before heading out to work with the cattle or repair fences or any of the 100 tasks that running a ranch required. Eleanor spent her days learning the rhythms of this new life, feeding the chickens, collecting eggs, cooking, cleaning, and starting the garden Garrett had helped her plot out behind the house. The work was hard but satisfying. Eleanor found herself enjoying the solitude during the day, the time to think and adjust. She was used to hard work, but this was different from the monotonous drudgery of the factory. Here, she could see the results of her labor immediately. The house grew cleaner and more organized. The meals improved as she learned to work with the ingredients available. The tiny shoots in the garden sprouted and grew. In the evenings, she and Garrett ate together and talked. The conversations were stilted at first, both of them feeling their way carefully, but gradually they grew easier. Garrett told her about the ranch, about his plans to expand the herd, about the neighbors scattered across the vast territory. Eleanor spoke carefully about her life in Boston, editing out the worst of the hardships, though she suspected Garrett understood more than she said. "You should know about the neighbors," Garrett said one evening about a week after her arrival. "The closest ranch is the Madison place, about 10 miles east. Frank and Sarah Madison run sheep, which causes some tension with the cattle ranchers, but they are good people. South of here is the Campbell Ranch. Wyatt Campbell is a hard man but fair. He has 3 sons, all of them rough as sandpaper. To the west is open range and north is government land that no one has claimed yet. Are there other women nearby? Sarah Madison, as I mentioned. She would welcome a visit, I am sure. The doctor in Casa Grande has a wife, Claire, who organizes the church socials. Martha Henderson, who you met. A few others scattered around. It is not a large community, but people look out for each other. I would like to meet them properly when the time is right. There is a church social next month. We could go together, introduce you properly to everyone. The idea both excited and terrified Eleanor. She would be on display, the mail-order bride, subject to curiosity and judgment. But she also longed for female companionship, for connection beyond the careful politeness she and Garrett maintained. As the days passed, Eleanor began to feel more comfortable in the house and around the ranch. She learned which path to take to the well that avoided the sharpest rocks. She figured out how to manage the temperamental stove. She learned the names and personalities of the chickens, laughing at herself for talking to them as she collected eggs each morning. She also became increasingly aware of Garrett in ways that had nothing to do with their practical arrangement. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, which was rare but genuine. She saw how gentle he was with the horses, speaking to them in low, soothing tones. She observed his patience when explaining things to her, never making her feel stupid for not knowing how things worked on a ranch. And she noticed the way he sometimes watched her, when he thought she was not looking, his expression unguarded and impossible to read. One afternoon, Eleanor was hanging laundry on the line Garrett had strung for her between 2 posts when she saw a rider approaching. She shaded her eyes against the sun, uncertain whether to be alarmed or curious. Garrett was out checking the cattle in the north pasture and would not be back for hours. The rider resolved into a woman as it drew closer, a figure in split skirts sitting astride a horse with obvious competence. She pulled up near the house and dismounted with easy grace. "You must be Eleanor," the woman called out cheerfully. "I am Sarah Madison. I heard Garrett had finally gone and gotten himself a bride, and I could not wait any longer to come meet you." Eleanor wiped her damp hands on her apron and came forward. Sarah Madison was perhaps 35, with sun-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical braid and a face full of good humor. She stuck out a work-roughened hand, and Eleanor shook it firmly. "It is wonderful to meet you," Eleanor said sincerely. "Garrett mentioned you. Would you like to come inside? I have cold tea." "I would love some. It is a hot ride from our place." Inside, Sarah settled at the table and accepted a tin cup of tea with obvious appreciation. "You have done wonders with this place already. It looks more like a home than just a house where a bachelor lives." "I have tried to make it comfortable. There is still much to do." "Garrett is a good man," Sarah said directly. "One of the best. You are fortunate." "I am beginning to realize that. He has been very kind." Sarah studied her with sharp but not unkind eyes. "And you? Are you adjusting all right? It must be a tremendous change from city life." "It is different," Eleanor admitted, "but not unwelcome. I am finding I rather like the space and the quiet." "Wait until winter. You will go mad from the quiet and the cold, and you will be desperate for another woman to talk to. That is why I came now, to introduce myself properly. I want you to know that you are welcome at our ranch anytime. If you need anything, if you are lonely, if you just want to talk, you can come to me." The kindness in Sarah's voice made Eleanor's throat tight. "Thank you. That means more than you know." "I know what it is like to be new to this territory," Sarah said. "Frank and I came out here 12 years ago from Ohio. I thought I would die of loneliness that first winter, but the community here, small as it is, saved me. We look after our own. They talked for over an hour, and Eleanor felt herself relaxing in a way she had not since leaving Boston. Sarah was easy to talk to, with a sharp sense of humor and a practical view of life. She shared advice about gardening in the desert climate, about which plants were edible and which were poisonous, about how to deal with scorpions and rattlesnakes. "You will see Garrett is different from most men out here," Sarah said as she prepared to leave. "He reads books, he thinks about things. His father was the same way, but do not mistake thoughtfulness for weakness. He can handle himself when needed." After Sarah left, Eleanor felt lighter, more anchored. Having a friend or the potential for friendship made this vast territory feel less isolating. When Garrett came in that evening, dusty and tired, she told him about the visit. "Sarah is a good woman," Garrett said. "Frank is lucky to have her. She is tough as nails. I liked her very much. She invited me to visit any time. You should go. It will be good for you to have friends here." That night, after Garrett had gone to the barn as usual, Eleanor lay awake thinking. 3 weeks had passed since her arrival. She and Garrett had settled into a comfortable routine, treating each other with careful courtesy. But it was not a real marriage, not yet. They were housemates, cordial strangers sharing space. Eleanor found herself wanting more. She was surprised by the strength of the wanting, by the way her eyes followed Garrett during the day, by the way her heart beat faster when he came close. She had not expected to feel attracted to him, had assumed this would be a practical arrangement without emotion. But Garrett was more than she had imagined, kinder, more thoughtful, more handsome. She caught herself thinking about him at odd moments, wondering what it would be like if he kissed her, if he held her properly. The realization that she wanted her husband, truly wanted him, was both thrilling and terrifying. But she had no idea if he felt the same way. He was unfailingly polite, but he maintained a careful distance. Perhaps he was simply being patient, or perhaps he did not find her appealing. Her shabby clothes and work-worn hands were far from attractive. The next morning, Eleanor woke with determination. She heated water and washed thoroughly, then put on her better dress, the one she had been saving. It was still worn, still patched, but it was the best she had. She brushed her dark hair until it shone and pinned it up carefully. When she looked in the small mirror, she saw a thin woman with shadows under her eyes, but also a woman with clear skin and good features. She would never be a beauty, but she was not unattractive. Garrett's reaction when he came in for breakfast was subtle but noticeable. His eyes widened slightly and he paused in the doorway. "You look nice," he said, and there was something in his voice that had not been there before. "Thank you," Eleanor said, feeling her cheeks warm. They ate breakfast in a silence that felt different, charged with something unspoken. When Garrett stood to leave, he hesitated, then said, "I need to go into Casa Grande today for supplies. Would you like to come with me? You could visit with Martha, perhaps buy fabric for a new dress." "I should have thought of that sooner. You need proper clothes." Eleanor wanted to protest that she did not need charity, but she looked down at her patched dress and knew he was right. "I do not have money for fabric. You are my wife. What is mine is yours. That includes money for necessities, and clothes are necessities." The words "my wife" sent a small thrill through Eleanor. He so rarely acknowledged their legal connection. "Then yes, I would like to come." The ride into Casa Grande was different from that first journey 3 weeks earlier. Eleanor felt more confident now, less overwhelmed. She pointed out the progress in her garden, and Garrett told her about a new calf that had been born the day before. They talked about practical things, but there was an undercurrent of awareness between them that had not existed before. In town, Martha Henderson greeted Eleanor like a long-lost daughter and pulled her immediately to the back of the store where bolts of fabric were displayed. Garrett handed Eleanor several bills, more money than she expected. "Get what you need. I will load the supplies. Eleanor selected fabric for 2 new dresses, one practical cotton for everyday wear and one nicer calico for church and social occasions. Martha helped her choose thread, buttons, and a length of ribbon. You could make a nice bonnet, too, Martha suggested. The sun here is brutal. When Eleanor emerged from the back room, Garrett was deep in conversation with another man, someone Eleanor did not recognize. The stranger was tall and well-dressed, with silver threading through his dark hair. He looked prosperous, and there was something calculating in his eyes that Eleanor did not like. "That must be Mrs. Morgan," the man said, looking Eleanor up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. "Garrett, you did not mention your bride was such a lovely woman." "Eleanor, this is Conrad Whitmore. He owns the largest ranch in the territory. Conrad, my wife, Eleanor." "Charmed," Conrad said, though his smile did not reach his eyes. "I was just telling Garrett that my offer still stands. I would pay a fair price for his land, more than fair. A young couple like yourselves could start fresh somewhere easier, somewhere with more opportunity." "The ranch is not for sale," Garrett said firmly. "It was my father's and it will be mine. Sentiment is all well and good, but it does not pay bills. Think about your pretty wife. Does she really want to spend her life scratching out a living on a hardscrabble ranch?" Eleanor stepped closer to Garrett, her voice steady. "My husband's ranch is my home. I am quite content there." Conrad's eyes narrowed slightly. "How refreshingly loyal. Well, the offer remains open. When you tire of the hard life, Garrett, you know where to find me." He tipped his hat and left, and Eleanor felt the tension drain from Garrett's shoulders. "That man has been trying to buy my land for 2 years, Garrett said quietly. "The water rights are valuable and his cattle could use my grazing land, but I will never sell." "Good," Eleanor said firmly. "That man made my skin crawl." Garrett looked at her with something like surprise, then smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face. "You are full of surprises, Eleanor Jameson." "Eleanor Morgan," she corrected softly. His eyes held hers for a long moment. "Eleanor Morgan," he repeated, and the way he said it made her heart race. They loaded the wagon with supplies and fabric, and on the ride home, the silence between them was comfortable, easy. Eleanor found herself sitting closer to Garrett than strictly necessary, and when the wagon hit a rut and she bumped against him, he did not pull away. If anything, he seemed to lean slightly into the contact. That evening, after a supper of fried chicken and vegetables from her garden, Eleanor cleared the table while Garrett sat with his coffee, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. The air felt thick with unspoken things, with possibility. "Eleanor," Garrett said finally, "we need to talk." She sat down across from him, her hands folded on the table. "All right. This arrangement between us, it has been working well. You have made this house into a real home, and I am grateful for that. But I think we both know this is not sustainable long term." Eleanor's heart sank. Was he going to suggest she leave, that the marriage be annulled? "What do you mean?" "I mean that I sleep in a barn while you sleep alone in the house. We are polite strangers who happen to be married. That was fine for an adjustment period, but I think that period has passed." "What are you suggesting?" Eleanor asked carefully. Garrett ran a hand through his hair, that gesture of discomfort she now recognized. "I am suggesting that we try to make this a real marriage, if you are willing. I would not force anything on you, but I think we could be happy together. I find I very much enjoy your company. You are smart and hardworking and braver than you probably realize. I would like to know you better, as a husband knows his wife." Eleanor's heart was beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. "I would like that as well. I have found myself wishing for the same thing." Relief washed over Garrett's face. "Truly, truly. I did not expect to feel this way, but I do. You have been so kind to me, so patient. You are a good man, Garrett Morgan, and I find I care for you more than I anticipated." Garrett stood and came around the table, offering his hand. Eleanor took it, and he drew her to her feet. They stood very close, and Eleanor could feel the heat radiating from him, could smell the scent of soap and sun-warmed skin. His hand was rough against hers, but his touch was gentle. "May I kiss you?" Garrett asked, his voice low. "Please," Eleanor whispered. He cupped her face with his free hand, his thumb brushing her cheek, then bent and kissed her softly. His lips were warm and careful, asking rather than demanding. Eleanor melted into the kiss, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart beating as fast as hers. When they pulled apart, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for days," he admitted, "but I did not want to presume." "I have wanted it too," Eleanor confessed. "I was afraid you did not find me attractive." "Not find you attractive? Eleanor, you are beautiful. I have thought so from the moment you stepped off that stage, dusty and exhausted and determined. You get more beautiful every day." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever called her beautiful before. "I am too thin, and my hands are rough, and my clothes are shabby." "You are perfect," Garrett said firmly. "And tomorrow we will go to the seamstress in Casa Grande and have you fitted for proper dresses. But tonight, if you are willing, I would like to move back into the house, into our room. We can take things slowly, but I do not want to sleep apart anymore." "I do not want that either," Eleanor said. "I want you with me." That night, Garrett came to bed in the room that had been his first and was now theirs together. They lay side by side in the darkness, hands clasped between them, and talked quietly about nothing and everything. Eventually, Eleanor drifted off to sleep with her head on Garrett's shoulder, feeling safer and more content than she had in years. The next weeks were a revelation. With the barriers down between them, Eleanor and Garrett grew closer rapidly. They talked endlessly, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes for the future. Garrett told her about his childhood on the ranch, about his father's dreams of building something lasting. Eleanor spoke more openly about the hardships in Boston, about the grief of losing her mother, about the desperation that had driven her to answer a mail-order bride advertisement. "I am glad you answered my advertisement," Garrett said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "I know it was born of necessity, but I cannot imagine this place without you now." "I am glad I came," Eleanor said, leaning against his shoulder. "I did not know I could be this happy." Garrett kissed the top of her head. "Neither did I." They fell into new rhythms. Garrett began teaching Eleanor to ride, putting her on his gentlest mare and walking beside her through the desert. Eleanor loved the freedom of it, the way the world looked different from horseback. She began to understand the land better, to see its beauty instead of just its harshness. Eleanor, in turn, transformed the ranch house completely. With the fabric she had bought, she made curtains for the windows and a new tablecloth. She sewed herself 2 new dresses, and Garrett watched with fascination as her skilled fingers flew through the work. "You are an artist with needle and thread," he observed one evening. "It is simply practice. I did piecework for 12 hours a day for 2 years. You learn quickly or you starve." "Well, you will never have to do that kind of work again," Garrett said firmly, "but I am glad you have the skill. Perhaps you could make things to sell in town if you wanted. Extra income is always useful." "I would enjoy that. It would give me something productive to do during the long afternoons." As summer deepened into early fall, the relationship between Eleanor and Garrett deepened as well. They became not just husband and wife in name but in truth, learning each other's bodies as they had learned each other's minds. Eleanor found joy in the physical intimacy, something she had not expected. Garrett was a patient and considerate lover, always making sure she felt pleasure as well as giving it. One morning, Eleanor woke feeling unwell. She barely made it outside before losing the contents of her stomach. Garrett was beside her immediately, holding back her hair and supporting her. "What is wrong? Should I ride for the doctor?" Eleanor straightened slowly, wiping her mouth with her handkerchief. Understanding dawned, followed by a mixture of fear and joy. "I do not think I need a doctor. I think I am with child." Garrett stared at her, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and then pure happiness. "A child, are you certain?" "Not entirely certain, but the signs are there. I have missed my monthly courses and now this morning sickness." "I did not want to say anything until I was more sure, but I suppose my body has decided for me." Garrett pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "A child, our child. Eleanor, I cannot believe it." "Are you happy about it?" Eleanor asked, needing to hear him say it. "Happy? I am overjoyed. Terrified, but overjoyed. We are going to have a family." The news changed something between them, adding a new dimension to their relationship. Garrett became even more protective, trying to keep Eleanor from lifting anything heavy or working too hard. Eleanor found it both touching and exasperating. "I am with child, not ill," she protested when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I can still do my normal work." "But should you? What if something happens?" "Garrett, women have been having babies since the beginning of time. They do not stop living their lives the moment they conceive." But she appreciated his concern, even when it was overbearing. It spoke to how much he cared, how much this child and their life together meant to him. When they attended the church social the following month, Eleanor was visibly pregnant, and the news spread through the small community like wildfire. Martha Henderson hugged her tightly. "I am so happy for you both. Your mother would have been proud." Sarah Madison pulled Eleanor aside. "How are you feeling? Do you need anything? I have baby clothes packed away from when my two were little." "I am well, thank you, and I would appreciate the baby clothes. We have so little prepared." The women of the community rallied around Eleanor in a way that touched her deeply. They brought gifts, tiny gowns and blankets, jars of preserved food, advice both useful and ridiculous. Eleanor had never had a community before, and she found herself overwhelmed by the generosity. Conrad Whitmore approached them at the social, his smile as calculating as ever. "Congratulations on the impending addition, Garrett. That will make ranch life even harder. You really should reconsider my offer. Think of your wife and child." "My family will be just fine on our ranch," Garrett said coolly. "The subject is closed, Conrad." After the social, as they drove home under a canopy of stars, Eleanor took Garrett's hand. "Do you ever worry that Conrad might be right? That life on the ranch is too hard. Do you want to leave?" "No, I want to stay exactly where we are, but I want to know your thoughts honestly." Garrett was quiet for a moment, the reins loose in his hands as the horses plodded homeward. "I will not lie and say it is not hard. It is. The work is brutal sometimes and the profits are slim. But it is ours, Eleanor. We are building something that will last, something we can pass on to our child. That matters more to me than an easy life." "Good, because I feel the same way. This ranch, this life, it is ours. I would not trade it for anything." "Even for your old life in Boston," Eleanor laughed. "Especially not for that. I was existing in Boston, not living. Here, I am truly alive." As fall progressed into winter, the weather grew cooler, though nothing like the brutal winters Eleanor remembered from Boston. The work on the ranch continued, with Garrett working long days to ensure the cattle were healthy and the structures were secure. Eleanor focused on preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and blankets, cleaning and organizing the small room Garrett had finally finished adding to the house. "This will be the nursery," Garrett said, running his hand along the smooth wall. "I want to build a cradle. My father built mine, and I still have the plans somewhere." He worked on the cradle in the evenings, his hands moving with skill over the wood. Eleanor watched him, marveling at his many talents. He was a rancher, a carpenter, a reader of books, and now he would be a father. She felt a surge of love so strong it nearly took her breath away. "I love you," she said suddenly. Garrett looked up from his work, his eyes widening. They had not spoken those words yet, though Eleanor had felt them for weeks. "You love me. I love you. I have for a while now, but I was afraid to say it. I did not know if you felt the same." Garrett set down his tools and came to her, kneeling beside her chair. He took both her hands in his. "I love you, Eleanor. I think I started falling in love with you that first day when you stood in the dust looking scared but determined. You are the bravest person I know, and you have made my life complete in ways I did not know were possible." Eleanor leaned down and kissed him, pouring all her feelings into the contact. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "We are going to be all right, are we not?" Eleanor asked. "Our little family, better than all right, we are going to be wonderful." Winter passed with surprising gentleness, and Eleanor grew large with child. By March, she could barely see her feet, and getting up from a chair required strategy. Garrett was endlessly patient, helping her with tasks that had become difficult, rubbing her swollen ankles in the evenings, and listening to her complaints about the discomforts of late pregnancy. One morning in late March, Eleanor woke with a deep ache in her back. By midday, she realized the ache had become something more rhythmic and insistent. The baby was coming. Garrett rode at breakneck speed to fetch Sarah Madison, who had attended many births and agreed to serve as midwife. While he was gone, Eleanor tried to stay calm, breathing through the increasing contractions and preparing the things they would need. Sarah arrived with her usual competence, immediately taking charge. She sent Garrett to heat water and gather clean linens, keeping him busy so he would not panic. The labor was long and hard, and there were moments when Eleanor thought she could not continue. But Sarah's calm presence and Garrett's worried face kept her going. As evening fell and the sky turned purple with twilight, Eleanor gave birth to a son. The baby's cry was strong and healthy, and when Sarah placed him in Eleanor's arms, she felt a love so fierce and overwhelming that tears streamed down her face. Garrett, who had been banished during the final stages of delivery, was allowed back in. He approached the bed with something like awe, looking down at the tiny red-faced infant in Eleanor's arms. "A son," he whispered. "We have a son." "Would you like to hold him?" Eleanor asked. Garrett took the baby with trembling hands, and Eleanor watched as her tough rancher husband melted completely. "Hello, little one. I am your father. I promise to protect you and love you every day of your life." They named him George after Garrett's father. Little George was a good baby, healthy and strong, with a lusty cry and his father's gray-green eyes. Garrett proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with George in the middle of the night, changing nappies without complaint, and marveling at every tiny feature. "He has your nose," Garrett observed one evening, studying the baby intently. "He has your eyes. He is perfect." "He is ours," Eleanor corrected, and Garrett smiled. The months after George's birth were exhausting but joyful. Eleanor navigated the challenges of new motherhood with the same determination she had brought to everything else in her new life. The women of the community continued to support her, bringing meals, offering advice, and cooing over the baby. Even the hardships seemed manageable with Garrett beside her. When a summer storm damaged part of the barn roof, they worked together to repair it, with Eleanor handing Garrett tools while George napped in a basket in the shade. When several head of cattle went missing, Garrett spent days tracking them down, and Eleanor managed the ranch alone, proving to herself how capable she had become. Conrad Whitmore remained a persistent annoyance, periodically renewing his offer to buy the ranch. Each time, Garrett refused more firmly. The tension between them grew, and Eleanor worried that Conrad might try something underhanded. But months passed, and nothing happened beyond continued verbal pressure. George grew from infant to toddler, taking his first steps on the porch of the ranch house and speaking his first word, which was "Papa," much to Garrett's delight and Eleanor's mock indignation. The ranch prospered under Garrett's careful management and Eleanor's skillful household economy. The cattle herd grew, the garden produced abundantly, and Eleanor's sewing brought in a steady stream of extra income. On a warm evening in late spring, when George was just over a year old, Eleanor sat on the porch with Garrett, watching their son play with a wooden horse Garrett had carved. The sun was setting in a blaze of color, and the air was soft and sweet. "You ever think about that day you arrived?" Garrett asked, his arm around Eleanor's shoulders. "I think about it often. I was so frightened, so uncertain. Everything I owned fit in a single carpet bag. And I was an idiot who was surprised and awkward and probably seemed like the worst possible husband." Eleanor laughed. "You were surprised, yes, but never the worst possible husband. Even then, I could see your kindness, your integrity. I have never regretted placing that advertisement, but I also never imagined it would lead to this. To you, to George, to this life. I thought I would get a competent partner to share the work. Instead, I got everything." "I was the one who got everything," Eleanor said softly. "I arrived with nothing, and you gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Garrett corrected. "That is what a marriage should be." They sat in comfortable silence, watching George, listening to the evening sounds of the desert, the call of birds, the rustling of wind, the distant lowing of cattle. This was home, Eleanor thought. Not the house, though she loved it, but this feeling of belonging, of being complete. Over the next years, the ranch continued to prosper. Garrett worked hard to expand the herd and improve the quality of his cattle. He invested in better breeding stock and fenced off sections for rotational grazing. His innovations and hard work paid off, and the Morgan Ranch became known for producing some of the best beef in the territory. Eleanor grew into her role as rancher's wife and mother with increasing confidence. She managed the household with skill, kept accounts meticulously, and raised George with a firm but loving hand. She also became an integral part of the small community, organizing church socials, helping new families who arrived in the area, and serving as an informal banker to folks who needed small loans until the harvest or the cattle sales. When George was 3, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant again. The pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Garrett was still protective but had learned to trust that Eleanor could manage her own body. In the winter of 1882, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter they named Emily, after Garrett's mother. Emily was different from George, quieter, more observant, with dark hair like Eleanor's and a serious expression that made her look wise beyond her years. George adored his little sister from the first moment he saw her, and Garrett walked around in a daze of happiness, unable to believe his good fortune. "2 children," he said, looking from George to Emily with wonder. "We have 2 perfect children and a wife I love more every day." "How did I get so lucky?" "Not luck. Hard work and love," Eleanor corrected, but she understood his wonder. She felt it herself every day. The children grew, and the ranch grew with them. Garrett built an addition to the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and enlarging the main room. Eleanor started a larger garden and added fruit trees, envisioning future harvests. George followed his father everywhere, learning ranch work from the time he could walk. Emily was content to stay closer to home, helping Eleanor with household tasks and showing an early talent for sewing. Conrad Whitmore continued his occasional attempts to buy the ranch, but they grew less frequent as the years passed, and Garrett's refusals remained absolute. The Morgan Ranch was clearly thriving, and it became obvious that no amount of pressure would convince Garrett to sell his father's legacy. One spring morning when George was 6 and Emily was 3, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant yet again. This pregnancy proved more difficult than the previous two, with persistent nausea and fatigue that lasted well beyond the first months. Garrett worried constantly, but Eleanor reassured him that every pregnancy was different. "I am fine," she insisted, though some days she did not feel fine at all. "This baby is just more demanding than the others were." In the fall, Eleanor went into labor 3 weeks earlier than expected. The labor was fast and fierce, and Sarah Madison barely arrived in time. Eleanor gave birth to twin boys, Benjamin and Lucas, who were small but healthy and loud enough to wake half the territory with their cries. Garrett looked at his 4 children with an expression of bemused joy. 4. "We have 4 children. I grew up as an only child and now I have 4. Are you complaining?" Eleanor asked, exhausted but happy. "Absolutely not. I am marveling. This house that was silent and empty 5 years ago is now full of life and noise and chaos. It is wonderful." The twins were a challenge, demanding double the attention and work, but the family adjusted. George and Emily helped as much as children could, fetching diapers and entertaining their baby brothers. Garrett hired a young man named Thomas to help with the ranch work, giving him more time to support Eleanor with the demanding infants. As the years continued to pass, the Morgan family became a fixture in the Casa Grande community. Garrett served on the town council and helped organize efforts to bring a proper school to the area. Eleanor taught Sunday school and continued her informal community support, becoming known as someone who could solve problems and mediate disputes. George grew into a serious young man with his father's work ethic and his mother's intelligence. Emily was creative and thoughtful, more interested in books and art than ranch work, but always willing to help when needed. The twins were wild and boisterous, keeping everyone on their toes with their energy and endless curiosity. One evening, when George was 12 and beginning to look more man than boy, he asked his father a question that had clearly been weighing on him. "Papa, why did Mama come all the way from Boston to marry you? How did that happen?" Garrett looked at Eleanor, who was mending one of the twins' shirts by lamplight. She nodded, indicating he should answer honestly. "Your mother was very brave," Garrett began. "She had lost her family and had no prospects in Boston. I had this ranch but no one to share it with. So I placed an advertisement looking for a wife, and your mother answered it. We wrote letters to each other for several months, and then she traveled here to marry me, even though we had never met in person." George's eyes widened. "She came all that way to marry a stranger." "I did," Eleanor confirmed, setting down her mending. "It was terrifying and risky, but it was also the best decision I ever made. Your father gave me a home and a family when I had nothing. He gave me everything." "But you gave us everything too," Garrett said. "You took a house and made it a home. You took a lonely man and made him happy. You gave me these 4 incredible children. We gave each other everything, George. That is what love means." Emily, who had been listening quietly from her corner with a book, spoke up. "That is the most romantic thing I have ever heard." Eleanor laughed. "It did not feel very romantic at the time. I was dusty and exhausted, and your father was surprised and awkward. But we grew into love, and that is often the best kind." As George moved into his teenage years, he took on more responsibility on the ranch, working alongside his father with increasing skill. Emily discovered a talent for teaching and began helping younger children in the community with their reading. The twins remained a whirlwind of energy, but were smart and capable when they chose to focus. Eleanor, now in her mid-30s, looked at her life with deep satisfaction. She had arrived in Arizona with nothing but desperation and a worn carpetbag. Now she had a thriving ranch, 4 healthy children, a husband who loved her deeply, and a place in a community that valued her. The scared, lonely girl who had stepped off the stage in Casa Grande all those years ago seemed like a different person entirely. One afternoon, while Eleanor was working in her now extensive garden, Sarah Madison rode up. They had remained close friends over the years, and Sarah's visits were always welcome. "I have news," Sarah said, dismounting with the ease of long practice. "Conrad Whitmore is selling his ranch and moving to California. His health is failing and his children have no interest in ranching." Eleanor felt a surge of relief she had not expected. "So that threat is finally over. It would seem so. Garrett will be glad to hear it." When Eleanor told Garrett that evening, he looked thoughtful. "I never wished ill on Conrad, but I will not pretend I am sorry to see him go. He made things difficult for years. Perhaps now you can focus entirely on building the ranch without that pressure." "The ranch is already built," Garrett said, pulling Eleanor close. "What I want to focus on now is enjoying the life we have created. The children are growing up so fast. Soon George will be looking at land of his own, and Emily will be courted by every young man in the territory. Do not rush them into adulthood. Let them be young a while longer. I am trying, but time does not wait for anyone. It feels like just yesterday you stepped off that stage, and now we have been married for over 10 years. 11 years this summer," Eleanor corrected, "and they have been the best years of my life. Mine as well. Every single day with you has been a gift." As the children grew older, the dynamics in the household shifted. George began talking about his future, about expanding the ranch or perhaps starting his own spread. Emily attracted attention from several young men, much to Garrett's consternation. The twins started school and proved to be bright students when they were not getting into trouble. Eleanor and Garrett's relationship deepened with time rather than fading. They still talked for hours in the evenings, still found joy in each other's company, still looked at each other with love and desire. The physical passion had matured into something richer and more complex, but it had never diminished. One night, lying in bed after the children were all asleep, Garrett traced patterns on Eleanor's shoulder and said, "I cannot imagine my life without you. Even trying to remember what it was like before you came is difficult. You are so woven into everything that you seem like you have always been here. I feel the same way. This ranch, this family, this life, it all feels inevitable now, as if it could not have happened any other way. But I remember how uncertain and frightened I was at the beginning. You were brave, you are still brave. I had to be. I had no choice. That is what makes it brave. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is acting despite the fear." As their 15th anniversary approached, Eleanor and Garrett planned a rare trip to Casa Grande without the children. George was old enough to manage the ranch for a day with Thomas's help, and Emily could supervise the twins. Eleanor and Garrett spent the day in town, ordering supplies, visiting with friends, and enjoying the simple pleasure of time alone together. In the general store, Eleanor saw a beautiful bolt of silk fabric, far finer than anything she usually bought. She ran her hand over it wistfully, but moved on to the practical cotton she needed. "You should get that silk," Garrett said quietly. "It is far too expensive for a ranch wife." You are my wife and you deserve beautiful things. Buy enough for a dress. We will commission the seamstress to make it up properly. Garrett, we cannot afford such extravagance. Eleanor, we can afford it. The ranch is doing well, better than it ever has. You work hard every day and you never ask for anything for yourself. Let me give you this. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. Even after all these years, Garrett's generosity still moved her. All right, thank you. She bought the silk, a deep blue that reminded her of twilight, and they arranged for the seamstress to make a dress suitable for the upcoming church anniversary celebration. As they drove home in the gathering dusk, Eleanor leaned against Garrett's shoulder, content and happy. Do you ever regret it? She asked suddenly. Bringing me here. I came with nothing, no money, no useful skills beyond sewing, no knowledge of ranch life. Not for a single moment, Garrett said firmly. You gave me everything that matters: love, family, partnership, joy. I was the one with nothing before you came. I had land and cattle, but I was alone. You filled my life with meaning. We filled each other's lives, Eleanor said. That is the truth of it. The 15th anniversary celebration was held at the church with the entire community in attendance. Eleanor wore her new blue dress, and Garrett wore his best suit. The children were scrubbed and polished, though the twins squirmed through the entire service. Afterward, there was a picnic with tables laden with food and music from a fiddle player who had traveled from Tucson. Martha Henderson made a speech about love and commitment, using Eleanor and Garrett as examples of a successful marriage. Eleanor felt her face grow hot with embarrassment, but she was also touched. She and Garrett had become pillars of this community, their story an inspiration to others. As the sun set and the celebration wound down, the Morgan family loaded into their wagon for the ride home. The children fell asleep in the back, exhausted from playing and eating. Eleanor sat close to Garrett, his arm around her shoulders, and looked up at the stars that seemed so much brighter and closer than they ever had in Boston. I have been thinking, Garrett said quietly, his voice just audible over the sound of the horses and wagon. George will be ready for his own place soon. What would you think about gifting him the north section of our land? There is good water there, and he could build a house, start his own herd, keep it in the family. I think that is a wonderful idea, Eleanor said. He has worked so hard. He deserves the chance to build something of his own. We would help him, of course, but it would be his. Maybe in a few years we could do the same for the twins, divide the ranch between the 3 boys. Emily will have a dowry when she marries. If she marries, she might choose to be a teacher and remain independent. True. Our daughter is independent-minded. I wonder where she gets that from. Eleanor laughed. From both of us, I suspect. We have done well, Eleanor. We have built a good life and are raising good children. I am proud of what we have accomplished together. So am I. We took almost nothing and turned it into this. Over the following years, their plans for George came to fruition. They gave him the north section of land on his 18th birthday, and he began building a small house with his father's help. The work was hard but satisfying, and George proved himself to be as capable as Garrett had been at his age. Emily, now 16, did indeed attract suitors, but she was in no hurry to marry. She had been offered a position teaching at the school in Casa Grande and was seriously considering it. The twins, now 12, were already talking about their future on the ranch, making elaborate plans for the herds they would run and the improvements they would make. One evening, as Eleanor and Garrett sat on their porch watching another spectacular sunset, Eleanor said, "Do you remember what you said to me the day I arrived? You said you would give me everything." "I remember. I had no idea then how much you would give me in return. I arrived with nothing and you gave me everything, a home, a family, security, love. But I realize now that I gave you those things too. We gave them to each other. That is the secret, is it not? A good marriage is not about one person giving and the other receiving. It is about both people giving everything and receiving everything in return. When did you become so wise? Eleanor teased. I learned it from you. You taught me everything important. As darkness fell and the stars emerged one by one, Eleanor thought about the journey that had brought her here. That terrified girl stepping off the stage into the Arizona heat had been transformed into a confident woman, a mother, a rancher's wife, and a valued member of a community. She had traveled thousands of miles and crossed into a completely different world, and she had found home. Not just a place, but a feeling. Home was Garrett's steady presence beside her. Home was her children's laughter and occasional arguments. Home was the land they had worked and the house they had filled with love. Home was the life they had built together from almost nothing. George married at 21, bringing a sweet girl named Caroline to the ranch. They built their life on the land Garrett and Eleanor had given them, and within 2 years, they made Eleanor and Garrett grandparents when Caroline gave birth to a daughter. Emily did become a teacher and showed no signs of settling down, much to her mother's amusement and secret pride. The twins, now young men of 16, worked the ranch with their father and showed every sign of continuing the family business into the next generation. On a warm spring evening, with Eleanor now in her early 40s and Garrett approaching 50, they took their customary seats on the porch. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and well-maintained. Smoke rose from the chimney of George's house in the distance. The sounds of the twins working in the barn drifted across the yard. Emily was inside, preparing lessons for the next school day. I have been thinking about our story, Eleanor said, taking Garrett's hand, about how it began and how far we have come. Our story has a good middle, Garrett replied, and I hope the ending is still far in the future. I hope so too, but I want to make sure I tell you while we have time how grateful I am. I came here with nothing, expecting very little, and you gave me everything that matters. Eleanor, you gave me just as much. More, perhaps. I was a lonely man working a ranch alone. You brought life and love and family. You made everything worth doing. We made it together. That is what I want the children to understand, that love is not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It is about two people choosing each other every day, working together, building something that lasts. They see that. We have shown them what a good marriage looks like. Whatever they do with their own lives, they will have that foundation. Eleanor leaned her head on Garrett's shoulder, feeling his arm come around her. The sky turned purple and then black, stars emerging like diamonds on velvet. The air cooled, carrying the scent of desert flowers and distant rain. In the house behind them, Emily sang softly as she worked. From George's house, the baby cried and was quickly soothed. The twins' voices rose in argument about something trivial, then fell silent. This was their life. Messy, complicated, sometimes difficult, but filled with love and purpose. Eleanor had arrived in Casa Grande with nothing but desperation and hope. Garrett had given her a home and a new beginning. Together, they had built a family, a ranch, and a life that exceeded anything either of them could have imagined alone. I love you, Eleanor said simply. I love you, Garrett replied. Today and always. They sat together as the night deepened, two people who had found each other across impossible distance and circumstance, who had chosen to build something beautiful from almost nothing. The mail-order bride and the cowboy had become partners, lovers, parents, and grandparents. They had created a legacy that would outlive them both. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the desert night surrounded them with its vast peace, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. She had come with nothing and received everything: love, family, home, and a happiness she had never dared to dream possible. The ranch would continue. The children would thrive and have children of their own. The land would be worked and loved and passed down through generations. But the foundation of it all was this: two people who had taken a chance on each other, who had committed to building a life together, who had learned that love was not just a feeling but a choice made fresh each day. Eleanor had arrived with nothing, and Garrett had given her everything, including his heart. But in the end, that simple statement did not capture the whole truth. The real truth was that they had given everything to each other, creating something far greater than either of them could have achieved alone. They had given each other a home, a family, and a love that would endure long after they were gone. And that, Eleanor thought as she sat in the comforting circle of her husband's arms, was the only ending their story needed.